welcome to Good Game. I'm Bajo.
And I'm Hex.
If you would like to see bones break, necks snap, and guts fall gently and gracefully to the floor, join us for Mortal Kombat X.
You need to help us, Kotal Khan.
It is too late for Earthrealm. Shinnok is now its master.
Also this week, a game where you just can't freaking do that and it won't do the what?
It's alright, Hex. It's alright, Hex. It's over. It's over. But first, can you name the game for this week? Titan Souls began as a game jam project, but after winning a bunch of awards, the team spent a bit over a year turning it into a fully fledged tale of a boy and his bow and arrow and a lot of titans.
With next to no setup, you're plonked into this ancient-feeling open world, which you'll get to explore very little of before you stumble into the game's first boss. And about a second later, your first death.
Yeah, at least the deaths aren't permadeath, but there sure are a lot of them. To balance this out though, bosses can be dropped with a single arrow.
But of course, you only have one arrow. So that means that every time you miss a shot, you're defenseless until you retrieve it. Now, you know me, Badge, I'm a sucker for archery in games, so the idea of crafting this entire game around an archer with only one arrow I found really intriguing. But as much as I wanted to love this, I just wasn't having fun.
Really, I had the complete opposite reaction. Each time this game knocked me down, I was determined to charge back in and try again. Sure, the bosses are hard, but I found inching closer each time was really rewarding.
Yeah, I agree that after all that hard work, finally felling the Titans gave me some real satisfaction. And I think the game captures that moment so beautifully. But then just getting there was such a slog.
Do you mean the open world component or the boss fights?
Well, both. I mean, for me there was a real disconnect between escaping these really aggressive bosses and then having to try and line up that one really accurate shot. You're pretty much always running during boss fights, which meant that I was shooting and hoping rather than being able to line up shots that actually felt skillful. Plus, the open world sections felt a little bit like padding since there wasn't any real gameplay in them.
I just don't agree with you on the bosses. I found them all so unique. And I found a good rhythm between learning their weak spot and then replaying it until I had the right shot. But yes, I couldn't agree with you more on the open world sections. It was just this big empty space between me and the bosses I wanted to get back to.
Oh, I know. Just respawn us at the bosses already.
Totally. Other games with brutal boss fights, like Dark Souls, pace the rest of the game out so you're just as tense and engaged in the moment-to-moment combat as regular enemies. But even with those pacing issues, the boss fights were balanced just right for me. I felt like I was making progress each time, and each boss added something new.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, because while I found the game's single arrow mechanic really interesting, I think for me being bounced around between those boss fights that felt too rushed and then those open world sections that were a bit dull just meant that I never really found a middle ground. So I'm giving it 2 stars.
I'm giving it 3.5 stars. Do you want to say it?
Not if you want to say it.
I'm not.
Do you want to do one word each?
Yeah. You say it.
And now here's Goose with the news. Pretty sure that was amazing.
It's pretty good.
All right, do one better.
All right.
Go.
And now here's Mr. Goosentons with the newsy woozy.
I did faces so you could use it. Now they will use it.
Here's what's making headlines. Some sad news for Australian games development as our last AAA developer, 2K Australia, is being closed down. A 2K representative said the decision to close the Borderlands pre-sequel developer was made to better manage ongoing development costs while improving the working proximity of our creative teams. The Canberra-based studio was originally formed in 2000 as Irrational Australia, and over the years worked on games such as Freedom Force, Tribe's Vengeance, and the Bioshock series. Valve is attempting to reduce instances of phishing and spam on Steam by limiting user accounts until they spend $5 US. Valve noted that the majority of malicious users had accounts which haven't spent any money. User accounts that haven't met the requirement won't be able to send friend requests, vote on reviews or greenlight, and post in discussions, among other restrictions. Electronic Arts has announced that it will soon shut down 4 of its free-to-play games. Battlefield Heroes, Battlefield Play for Free, FIFA World, and Need for Speed World will all be permanently taken offline on July 14th. EA Executive Vice President Patrick Soderland said the games are being shut down because they just weren't as popular as they once were. No refunds will be available for any unused game currency, so spend them while you got them. Indie horror sensation Five Nights at Freddy's could be moving to the silver screen. Reports say Warner Brothers are currently searching for writers for the project, while one of the producers says they're looking forward to creating an insane, terrifying, and weirdly adorable movie. And that's all for this week.
Thanks, Goose. We've seen many fine additions to the survival genre of late. It's very popular at the moment. And most of these experiences have seen us foraging for berries, or setting traps, trying to craft tools out of sticks and stone, or scavenging abandoned buildings for supplies. But what happens when you take a survival game and put it under the sea?
Subnautica is an underwater survival game, and we should point out that it's not the actual in-game music. The real music and sound effects are actually quite ambient and appropriate.
Yeah, but with all the coral and the brightly coloured fish swimming around, I found myself singing Under the Sea anyway. Or an unlicensed version that sounds really similar.
So how do you find yourself in this aquatic wilderness? Well,
humanity is beginning to colonize space.
after being appointed to a terraforming assignment as part of Earth's mission to colonize space, your ship, the Aurora, mysteriously malfunctions upon descent and crashes. You awaken inside a life pod and you must set out to explore and survive.
I love how your mission is not to just colonize a particular planet, but just space as a whole.
Yeah, just space.
All of
Get
space.
out there, just go for it.
Yeah. This is an early development build of the game. It's not finished yet, but right now all the basic survival elements are there for you to explore. Upon leaving the pod, you have limited oxygen to search around for food and supplies.
10 seconds of oxygen remaining.
Fish are surprisingly easy to catch with your bare hands, and there's scrap metal from the wreckage all over for you to collect and use as crafting materials. Hunger, thirst, health, and oxygen are all vitals that you'll need to keep track of.
Caution, calorie deficiency detected.
I like the strange alien design of the sea life. Once you've caught some fish, you can head back to your pod to chow down on them before hunger has you in its clutches.
Warning, severe calorie deficiency detected. Internal organ damage detected. Vital signs stabilizing.
They're salty fare if you eat them raw, however, so it's a good idea to cook them first. Although weirdly, you need salt in order to cook things. Right now, the UI is a bit basic and rough around the edges, but it's pretty easy to figure out.
Staying on top of hunger and thirst can be a little bit frustrating when all you want to do is look around and discover.
Emergency.
Though
10
it's
seconds.
oxygen that really limits exploration. It runs out really quickly. One of your first priorities in the game after stockpiling some food should be crafting an oxygen tank to extend your breathing time.
You can also craft pipes to create pipelines of air to the surface. This is particularly handy when exploring the deeper areas of the ocean, where making it all the way back up to the surface before your air runs out can be much more difficult.
Naturally though, the deeper you go, the nastier the creatures that lurk there.
Emergency. 10 seconds of oxygen remaining.
So far, the environmental design is really impressive, don't you think?
Yeah, and the controls for movement too. It feels intuitive and easy to navigate. In the past, water levels have always been a frustrating addition to a game. But smooth controls and interesting nooks and passageways to discover make underwater exploration actually enjoyable in Subnautica.
I agree, and I can see where this is going with all the materials that are available to craft with. Silicon to enhance my diving suit, and building materials to create underwater structures.
Yeah, and when you boil it down, you're basically searching for materials and minerals to build structures in an open world environment to survive. It's basically Minecraft.
Yes, but under the sea!
Yeah.
I was a little bit disappointed that I couldn't get anywhere near my ship though due to radiation.
Yeah, me too. I'm hoping we can find some materials and build an anti-radiation suit, so maybe we can board this ship and find some cool supplies, or answers to the mysteries as to why the ship malfunctioned in the first place.
Yes, and then maybe it's full of necromorphs like in Dead Space.
Ooh. All in all though, I think this game has real promise. It's a great setting for a survival game, and if you feel too limited by having to constantly keep track of so many vitals,
Starvation imminent.
there is a freedom mode that lets you explore without the threat of hunger or thirst.
Yes, there's also a hardcore mode which involves permadeath. No thank you. What would really be great though is if they managed to get co-op in there. The devs haven't confirmed this will be a feature, but they are experimenting with it, I believe. I really hope they manage it because I often find these games a little lonely and I much prefer working together with someone to ensure survival.
Yes, I am looking forward to spending more time with this game and to see how it turns out.
Yeah, me too.
After centuries of armed conflict, the world was plunged into an abyss of nuclear fire and radiation. But it wasn't the end. Welcome to a swinging place I know called the Capital Wasteland. Once the bustling capital of the good old US of A, the city of Washington has undergone somewhat of a drastic remodeling after the nuclear fallout of 2077. And while war never changes, things in DC certainly did. Reduced to a scorched shell of its former self, the utter desolateness of the wasteland is an overwhelming sight to behold. The harsh sun blinding those stepping out onto its surface for the very first time. With barely any life remaining, the rocky countryside is awash with a palette of dusty browns and dirty greys. A noxious haze floats over the land in every direction, giving the impression that whatever is left in this world is either sick or dying. Scanning the horizon feels utterly hopeless, with nothing more than rubble and wreckage stretched as far as the eye can see, your only real guide being remnants of old road or tall transmission towers. Soon, however, distant outlines of structures and townships begin to appear, signposting that somewhere, somehow, life found a way. Famous landmarks that somehow managed to withstand the destruction now serve as beacons of interest to wanderers of the wasteland. Once celebrated monuments are now rebuilt and repurposed to deal with the pressures of post-nuclear inner-city living. And while some, like the hulking aircraft carrier of Rivet City, offer you a haven from raiders, mutants, and the sting of a radiated scorpion, nowhere in the wasteland ever feels truly safe. Although I have heard Megaton is due for a bit of a population boom soon. Just bought an apartment there. In fact, approaching any of these outposts too hastily can be pretty hazardous. With the majority of the population now either vaporized, mutated, or lightly toasted, crazed and desperate survivors in the wasteland tend to go with the "that's first, ask questions later" approach. An incredibly useful tactic to apply yourself, especially if you're considering taking the subway. And if it's not the locals who are looting your body for caps, even your diet can lead to your demise in DC. Chowing down on strange meat and mutt fruit might keep you alive, but can leave a rather rad taste in your mouth. Even more important is the search for clean water. With lakes and riverbeds reduced to muddy, radioactive puddles, searching for sustenance is vital for survival. Even if that means sipping out of an S-bend. Despite all this detritus and danger, what's left of the world up here in the Capital Wasteland is still exciting to explore, especially after years bottled up in an underground vault. And with a bit of gritty determination to survive, it's possible to make good on the freedoms afforded by a little nuclear fallout.
Alright, Hex, let's get into it. In Mortal Kombat X, Earthrealm is once again invaded by interdimensional outworlders, and of course, the only way to stop them is to fight!
You don't even think of hurting her.
There are worse things than death.
MKX is the latest in the long-running fighting series, known for its uppercuts and unapologetic gore. So for those of you with a weak stomach, this is your blanket warning. You're gonna see some guts.
Yes, in fact, it's only 5 seconds into the campaign before you see the inside of someone's head.
Oh, such next-gen detail, Bajo.
Yes, this is the most bone-crushing, sinew-pulling, gut-disemboweling Mortal Kombat yet.
Bajo, I'm actually impressed this game still manages to shock with its gore after all these years. But more importantly, it's an excellent fighter. It's rare that any game gets to its 10th installment, and developer NetherRealm Studios has certainly earned it.
Let's start with the story, because it has one. Shao Kahn has been defeated.
But Shao Kahn wasn't ready to lose.
Some of Earthrealm warriors are undead now, and there's a medallion which has some great power that can mean total rule over a whole dimension. Earth gets invaded again, and then the story goes back in time a bit. It's all quite hard to follow, and I admit, Hex, once Sub-Zero and Scorpion sat down to have a cup of tea, I tuned out.
Yeah, it's a bit like that.
We had abandoned it long before.
Basically, what it all boils down to is the evil elder god Shinnok has been trapped, and he's trying to get out. In the end, they've done a pretty good job with the MKX storyline, considering how many characters they've put into the plot and how difficult it must be to find reasons for them to randomly start fighting.
War is not over.
All the Mortal Kombat characters are aging, and it's fun to see their older selves. Johnny Cage is a silver fox now.
Raiden told me later that I'm descended from some Mediterranean war cult.
He's also not so much of a jerk anymore, which is much less entertaining. He's got more of a heroic suave vibe now.
There's a fair bit of plot revolving around him and Sonya, his ex-wife. And Hex, I've been in love with Sonya since the first game came out when I was 12, an important time of change in a young man's life, and I love her even more now. She's just awesome. Tough, hardened by marriage as well as battle.
Never time for me and Cassie.
I had responsibilities.
And she fights so well now. And Hex, I noticed they've scaled back the boob factor with the character models.
I noticed that too.
Well, except for Goro.
The overall distinctly less jiggle factor this time around. The campaign is full of larger backdrops and more detail than we've seen before in MK games, and each fight feels massive with plenty of weight behind character motivations.
The whole game is just one giant climax, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of like the last fight in a Rocky film where like everything is at stake, only in this it's like every 30 seconds for 6 hours.
Shao Kahn murdered you.
Something you allowed to happen.
This is more cutscene than game, but they're so exciting that you're always engaged. It's also got some simple but surprisingly fun QuickTime events thrown in to keep things interesting.
It's just nice to have a decent campaign in a fighting game, although this is another game where the cutscenes don't look as nice as the in-game footage.
What a backwards world of games we live in now.
You're so clever.
They've obviously learned a lot from developing Injustice, their DC fighting game, which was the first fighting game in a long time, maybe ever, to have a solid story.
But let's get to the combat. This is a fast-paced fighter with a few new ideas and tweaks to the systems we know. The biggest addition is character variations.
Yes, each character has 3 of them. Some focus on trap devices and secondary hovering abilities, such as Sonya's drone, and some charge things like gauntlets for more damage.
Most characters still share their core abilities, but the variations all do play quite differently. It's a mammoth amount of strategy to learn for your guy, the character you like playing as the most. And of course, knowing all of the moves of your opponents as well.
Yeah, I can only imagine how much work must have gone into playtesting to balance them all, Bajo.
Yeah, I think fighting games are deceptively difficult to develop in general, let alone multiplying all your characters by 3.
What I like most about this variation system is that it solves that problem of characters that I really like the look and style of, but just don't enjoy fighting with. Variations mean that there's more chance players will find a style they like with a fighter they like as well.
I like how some of the enhanced moves have armor. So if you do an enhanced attack, which uses a part of the energy bar that you build up during a fight, it will go right through an opponent's incoming attack. And for the pros, there's release check options, extra controller settings, and plenty of stats to go over to learn how to craft a good combo strategy. And when you do go up against a great player, you can't help but be in awe of their skill at weaving together so many crazy abilities and combos. It's a painfully beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks to lose, but at the same time, you can't help but be impressed by the sheer skill involved in a masterful defeat.
I especially love starting a Mortal Kombat game fresh with new players because you just see everyone on the sides of the screen just bobbing up and down trying to figure out the moves. Then trying to link them all together with uppercuts and sweeps and finally combos.
Oh, there's always one too many.
Yeah, there's always a second bit where you're like, they're definitely dead, man.
And of course, trying to remember complicated fatalities.
Finished him!
I think for newcomers, button mashing will only get you so far. There's a real finesse to this uppercut combo system that just feels so rewarding to find your groove with.
Yeah, there really is nothing like a well-timed uppercut.
Okay, let's talk about the new characters. There's Cassie Cage, who shares her parents' abilities. She's quick and sassy. There's Takeda, son of Kenshi and apprentice of Scorpion. Much like Cassie, he's a hybrid of Kenshi and Scorpion's style, using chain-like whips with a bit of a Solid Snake vibe.
Aaron Black is one of the more interesting new characters. He's a human gunslinger mercenary. There's Kung Jing, cousin of Kung Lao. He uses a bow, which is also a staff with great range, and he's a hard character to get close to. The biggest standouts, though, are Devora and Farah and Tor. Devora is gross, a kind of bug hive queen creature with brutal stabbing attacks.
Farah and Tor make for an interesting choice as well. A big hulking mass and a tiny female warrior who work in tandem to wreck you. Tor uses Farah by throwing her at you, and when she's knocked down, Farah kind of disappears into the background to run back to Tor. It's just impressive to be fighting with two characters at once and have it feel so fluid. The backgrounds feel quite alive too, and you can interact with them by leaping off things or throwing objects at your enemies.
Do you like barrels?
Stop throwing fireballs at me!
My favourite object to throw, Hex, is the old woman.
Hey, Hex.
You just threw the old one. Oh, look at her, now she's dead.
Yeah, she's had a rough time.
Oh no, the poor old lady.
Well, don't stand next to two demigods fighting and you won't get thrown at one of them. It's common sense. Overall, this animation is so fluid though, isn't it? It's just a beautiful game to watch in motion. You don't feel cheated by any abilities because the way the game calculates hitboxes and hit timing is spot on. Characters are massive on screen and the cloth physics are excellent and the camera moves cinematically around the action. Characters also move like they should. Heavy hitters are slow, other characters that rely on close combat are more nimble.
I like how slow and meaty the bigger characters are, especially Goro, who is paid DLC. He's just this giant bag of muscles hulking through the battle.
I also really liked Kano's new outfit. I'm rubbish at playing as him though. And Reptile looks so reptilian now.
Almost in a kind of 50s sci-fi way. There's also DLC coming with Predator, Jason, Tremor, and Tanya. There are a lot of favorites who pop up in the campaign, such as Baraka, Sindel, and Rain. But it always makes me so sad, Bajo, when I see these characters pop up in the campaign and then I can't play as them.
Yeah, you know we're gonna have to pay for them later.
Now.
Overall, even more than the last game, MKX feels like a really tight tug-of-war, to and fro kind of fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. These tussles feel like a real struggle now. A battle as each character fights for space to do their moves, fighting to cover distances without getting hit. And you mostly notice this when you're playing someone at your skill level.
Oh, no! Ah! Ah, it's all over. No!
I had so many nights, Hex, just playing with one other person online, rematch after rematch into the wee hours of the morning.
I do think this is a less accessible Mortal Kombat though. I mean, the tutorial is good, but I think newcomers will still struggle. Especially with all of those character variations to get your head around.
Absolutely. And there are some tough characters to learn, like Kotal Khan and his weird buff system, or Aaron Black's standoff ability, which is so delightfully Wild West. But is that a bad thing? I want to find reasons to sit down and really learn a character.
I think the challenge is that fighters aren't the most popular genre, so it's always hard to bring in newcomers. But then for those who do really like them, they demand a complicated game full of depth, so that's almost a barrier in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that fighters are repetitive in nature, and that doesn't help. But good campaigns seem to be bringing in new people. Certainly a lot of people played Injustice, their last game, because it had that great campaign.
All right, Bajo, it's time to talk X-rays and fatalities.
Yes, now we always struggle to show these in our current time slot. So one solution we have this time around is we're going to split the screen in half. So up the top, we're going to have the brutal fatalities, bones crunching, blood guts, all that sort of stuff. And down the bottom, we're going to have some nice lovely animals for you to look at and to enjoy. So if you don't like seeing guts and bones, then just go like this.
And you'll still have something nice to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the rest of you, enjoy, I guess.
Kung Lao wins. Fatality.
Yes, Mortal Kombat doesn't walk a line when it comes to gore, it runs across it, gutting you along the way and dragging you with it by your intestines. It's a hallmark of the series, and these new fatalities range from disturbingly hilarious, such as Cassie's jaw-breaking selfie, to just plain disturbing, such as with Melina's, who eats faces, and there's one where she destroys your lower torso while your upper torso screams and pushes itself away. This is video games in 2015.
Oh my god.
Yeah, there's always a bit of a debate with this series as to whether these go too far or not, and I don't know, I think we've always felt that some of them are a little bit unnecessary. But at the same time, they're there to push those boundaries, much like satirical horror films like the Evil Dead series.
This one's weird. You're just like full of sand. Sandality.
A sandality.
I'm not really sure how much more we could say on the topic that we haven't said already. Mortal Kombat is not a game for kids, it's rated R18+, and you have to go into it knowing that it's going to try and make you wince.
But as far as modes go, there is more than enough online and offline to keep you busy. Online works quite well on the console versions we tested. Matches were mostly lag-free and plentiful, although working through the online menus was a little laggy, which might just be launch blues.
It's good you can actually get matches now, because their last two games, Injustice and MK9, had so many problems online, I ended up giving up on them pretty quickly, which is such a shame. It seems only the PC version is really suffering with MKX this time around, but patches are slowly helping. What are you giving it overall, Hex?
Well, I think the gore is always going to be divisive, but it's hard to fault MKX for its refined fighting mechanics. I think this is the best Mortal Kombat yet. I'm giving it 4 stars.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. I'm giving it 4.5.
Quan Chi needs to clean up his man cave.
It's cleaner than yours.
You're comparing me to Quan Chi?
Only in terms of cleanliness.
Making my way downtown. To Bajo. Maybe it's free mouse pads. Did you? Yes! It was Chiller from 1986. Set in a variety of classic horror locations, your gruesome task was to maim and torture in as many ways as possible. This game was made for the arcades, but many refused to take the game as it was just too graphic.
Next week on the show, there is no stopping the Assassin's Creed juggernaut as the franchise moves into the 2.5D realm with Chronicles.
So until next time, Bajo out.
Hex out. Did you get those under the sea vibes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I don't know the song very well, so I start going,
The
under
seaweed
the
is
sea
always greener
and Jamaica.
in somebody else's lake.
a
You
crab.
dream about going up there, but that is a big mistake.
Why is he Jamaican?
Just look at the world around you, right here on the ocean floor.
Is he part of some sort of
Such wonderful
exchange
things
program
around you.
between
What
Jamaica
more are
and
you looking for under
America?
the sea? Under the sea.
I thought it was above the sea.